Please say. So before we explained, the Rebbe explained Kapitel Kuf Beis, how the connection between Tefillah and Torah, the beginning of the Perek, and then the end of the Perek, it starts with the Tefillah La'onik Yativ, and it ends with the Kosov L'Teir Achre, the union of Torah, because we achieve through the bittul of tefillah, we achieve the level of bittul also in Torah. The Rebbe is going to explain similarly now in Mizmer Kuv Gimel, which also begins with the level with the tefillah and with Borchi Nafshi. And as the Rebbe explains that the level of Borchi Nafshi is Hashem is in the highest level of bittul, not just bittul. And then later on, this comes down into Lishmoya Isa Dvor Lishmoya B'Kol Dvorei, which is Nase before Nishma, which was the introduction of Torah, as the Rebbe will explain. Look inside. Derech Zeho b'Mizmer Kuv Gimel, and similarly is also in the Mizmer, the number 103, which is the Mizmer they started to say at that year for the Friedrich Rebbe's capital from his for his birthday. So Maschil be'inyan atfilo, it starts with davening. It says Borchi Nafshi es Hashem. So Borchi Nafshi es Hashem. My soul blesses Hashem. Shu tfilas shevach v'hoidoya. That's a prayer of praise and thank you. Ubetefilo atzmo. And as far as tefillah itself, within tefillah, it's tefillah shebetachlis habitl. It's a davening which is with total bitl, complete bitl. The Baruch Nafshi es Hashem is an extremely bitlik tefillah, as the Rebbe will bring down now from the Gemara. The Gemara says that David HaMelech said three times Baruch Nafshi es Hashem in in five different situations, when he was in his mother's womb and when he came out to the world and later on, five worlds that he said Baruch Nafshi es Hashem in all cases. Baruch Nafshi Hashem. Kedisa b'Gemara, as the Gemara says, David dor b'chamisha olamim. David lived in five worlds. Ubechol olam Omar Shiro, and in each world that he lived in, he said the Shiro, he said Borchi Nafshi. Chamisha Borchi Nafshi, the five times Borchi Nafshi. The Yeshloimar, so the Rebbe says, what is the idea of five? Basically, the Gemara counts there the five times that David HaMelech said the Borchi Nafshi represent the five happenings to a person from birth all the ways till his passing. The Yeshloimar Shekol Hamu'ureis the Ha'odom Nechlokis Lechamisha Sugim. We can say everything that happens to the person can be divided up into five categories, which is the Chamisha Oilomim. Those are five categories, which are five worlds. The David Omar Shira LaHakodesh Baruch Hu Al Kol Hamu'ureis. And David said song to Hashem for everything that happens, these five things that he enumerated, those five things that he went through, and everything that he went through, he thanked Hashem. In order to say Shira for Hashem, even when you go through difficult situations, you need a tremendous level of bittul and trust in Hashem. The Amidas Shira LaKodesh Baruch Hu Gam Al Hoinyonim Dehepach, because these are things in a person's life which also David HaMelech faced adversity, and these are difficult things, and these are matters that are opposite Hatoiv HaNidav HaNigla, that are not, they're opposite of visible and revealed good. Still, he said, Shira LaKodesh Baruch Hu. David said, even on the Inyonim that are opposite of a Torah Nigla. How does a person say thank you to Hashem and praises Hashem, even when his situation is not as it should be on a revealed way? Humipnei goydel va'otzim habitl. That is because of the great and the powerful bitl that the person has. Ubehemshach hamizmer omer, and then following the mizmer. So that's in the beginning. A tefillah of an immense, a tremendous bitl. And the continuation of the mizmer, he says, Baruch Hu Hashem Malochav, let the angels bless Hashem, Gibore Koyach, those who have powerful strength. Then it says, Oisa Devorei Lishmoya Bekol Dvorei, who do what Hashem says, and then they listen to what Hashem says. So this, the Gemara takes this verse of the Tehillim that says to do what Hashem says, and then to listen to Hashem. Bereisha oisi, bahadar lishmoya. First they do what Hashem says, and then they listen. That this was the inspired the Yidden to the Hagdomas Nase Lenishma. Moshe Rabbeinu heard the Malachim, as the Gemara in Shabbos discusses that this is from the attitude of the Malachim, Lishmoya, and then Lasi Oise, and then Lishmoya, that the Yidden responded to Hagdomas Nase Lenishma. That was the introduction of saying first we will do and then we will listen. So this was the introduction of Nase. Before Nishma was the introduction for Kabbalah Satoira. But this doesn't yet explain specifically that this is the study of Torah. We're saying that they will do before they will listen, but why? The fact that this was the preparation for Torah, that means that Nasa Nishma is for Torah, for Kabbalah HaTorah. Not only for doing, but for accepting the Torah. So it has a special connection to Torah. V'yesh loymar, sha'akesher d'shnei ha'inyonim hu. What's the connection between these two inyonim of Matan Torah and having the bittel of Nasel and Nishma? So Yeshloima Shakesher Dishnei Hoinyonim, the tie between these two ideas was the connection Ki Kesher Dishnei Hoinyonim, the connection between the level of Nasiv and Nishma Bittel to the to Matan Torah, who ki habitl da hagdomas nasa lenishma, who loyrak b'negei lekima mitzvahs, because the subjugation, this bitl of hagdomas nasa lenishma, that we do nasa before nishma, which represents the level of bitl, who loyrak b'negei lekima mitzvahs. This is not only for mitzvahs. We say nasa and then nishma, so that the mitzvahs will be done. And we first say we will do, and then we will listen. So we're talking about observance of mitzvahs, and that mitzvahs need to be done in a way that we do them even before we know the nishma. The Rebbe says, no, this is connected specifically to Matan Torah also. Elagam b'limud Torah, but also the learning of Torah. You have to have this. When you learn Torah, you need the bittul of Nasa Koidan Nishma. As in the Gemara, the Rebbe says in the note over here, in the Gemara, when the person was learning, the tzeduk, he saw Rava learning and blood was coming from his hand. He told him, Amo Pizizu, that they first spoke and they said Nasa before they knew what they were doing. And that was, he said it in a derogatory way. And he said to him, this is actually why the Yidden were Tumas Shorim Tanchim, that they got the Torah. Basically, that this introduction of Nasa and Nishma, Lasel and Nishma, also is connected to learning Torah. That was the case over there that the Gemara talks about, that the Amu Pziza. So this was to do with Limud Torah. So what's the connection between the level of Nasav and Nishma, this idea of Nasav and Bittel, with the Hachona that this was before Matan Torah? Shal Yidei Shalifnei Matan Torah, Dal Yidei Shalifnei Matan Torah, Hikdimu Nasav and Nishma. Through this, that before Matan Torah, they said Nasa before Nishma. Niten hakoyach lekol echad mi Yisrael. Then the power was given to every one of the Jewish people. Shalimud haTorah shelo yiyeh bebittel. That his power, that his Torah should be bittel. So this was a power given to the study of Torah, not only to the mitzvahs are done nasa koin nishma, but in order for the person to learn in a way of bittel, that was achieved through Hagdomas Nasl Nishma. What does it mean to learn Torah b'bittel? Be'oifun, in such a way, as the pasuk says, Tan l'shoini imrosecha, that my tongue will respond. It's like just like repeating after somebody. Ka'oina achar ha'omer. Ta'an l'shoini. Ta'an means to repeat, like somebody who answers after somebody who says. So basically, when you're saying the words of Torah, you're basically repeating the words of the Eberster. It's not your words, it's not you're saying that, you're learning it. You're repeating Hashem's words. That's a total level of bittul where it's not, there's no you over there. There's only the Eberster. You're only responding and you're only repeating after the Eberster, but it's the Eberster speaking. V'ad shahadibur shaloi b'toira einei tolui b'ritzoinu b'bchirosoi. To the extent that his words of Torah that he says are not really up to his will and his choice. He's just repeating. He's such a bittul. Those are not his rotzin and his choice's word. This is from the language, as the Rebbe says from the Alter Rebbe. These are not his words. Those are the Eibishter's words. And further even, shabitul shaloik she'isik b'Torah, that his subjugation, when he is occupied in Torah, udugmas habitul, that would be similar to that subjugation, dal kol dibur v'dibur parcha nishmasa. So every word and word, the soul flew out. That's by the Yidden when they were hearing the Aseres HaDibros. So the neshama flew away. So the body was left without it, and then it came back. The Eibishter brought it back to them. So that's totally loss of your self, of your mitzias. And that's the extent of bittul that a Yid has when he learns Torah. How did he get that bittul? From Hagdomas Nase Lenishma. That level of bittul that introduced before Matan Torah give the person the koyach to learn Torah in such a way. How does the Yid get that level of bittul that comes through the Barchi Nafshi, through the bittul of the Perek? V'zuhi hashaychus da'oise dvorei lishmoya b'kol dvorei. And that's the connection of the Torah. Says lishmoya b'kol dvorei after oise dvorei, but lishmoya b'kol dvorei, to listen b'kol dvorei in the words of Hashem, and which means that the Rebbe brings down from the Haloir that this is the same idea of dvoroi tan l'shonim rosecho, as the Rebbe brings down the note over here in the note, that when we say oise dvoroi lishmoya b'kol dvoroi, what is lishmoya b'kol dvoroi? It's to listen to kol dvoroi, even though it's not your words when you're learning Torah. So, what's the connection between this level of the Shemaya B'Kil Dvorei, which is in the end of the Perek, Leborche Nafshi Es Hashem, to the level of Borche Nafshi? And we said before the tefillah in a tremendous level of bittul to this L'Shemaya B'Kil Dvorei, Ki Al Yidei Havodas HaTefillah, that through the davening, the labor, the work of davening, especially such a davening in which you say song for every happening. Chamisha Baruch Nafshi, the five Baruch Nafshi, which represents all of life, all of different olamis. So through that, Nimshach Habitl, the Tefillah Gam Be'esek HaTorah Shaloi. So then the bitl extends also his bitl of davening also to his learning of Torah. Um, So now the Rebbe wants to also explain how this Perik Kuf Gimel, the bittel that we're talking about in Perik Kuf Gimel, is even more than we learned in Perik Kuf Beis, where we learned Tekosev L'Doir Achre, which is the level of Nitzchis that comes to bittel, is even in a greater bittel discussed in Perek Kuf Gimel. So the Rebbe explains now the connection between Lishmoya B'Kol Dvorei to the beginning of the Perek of Baruch Nafshi. We can add the explaining the connection of the Lishmoya Lishmoya B'Kol Dvorei. When you learn Torah, that is to listen to Kol Devorei, we listen to the words of Hashem, the level of bittul, Lishmoya B'Kol Devorei, this is the Dibur of Hashem, L'chamisha Baruch Nafshi, to the beginning of the Perek in which we talk about the 5 level of Baruch Nafshi. The Iker HaChidush B'Habittul, the Limud HaTorah. Where is the main Yiddish that there needs to be the study of Torah, the novelty that Torah is studied in a way of subjugation? When a person learns Torah Shabbat, anyways, he doesn't understand it. It's lachatchila and not. When you learn Torah Shabbat Peh, in which there is a requirement that you should use your intellect and you need to understand, and still we're saying you should be bebitl. So the Iker HaChidush Ba'abitl the Limud HaTorah, the main novelty, when is it is in studying Torah, bebitl hu b'Torah Shabbat Peh. That's when we learn the oral Torah. Because shalimuda tzorich li is bavona vasoga. Learning Torah Shabbat Peh needs to be done with understanding and grasping. The kshe'einei mevin hapirush einei nechshav limud. If you don't understand what you're saying, the meaning is not considered learning. You can learn Torah Shabbat without understanding. You can say Tehillim, you can say other things, but if you don't understand Torah Shabbat Peh, as Alter Rebbe writes in the Shulchan Aruch, that's not considered learning b'chlal. So here we're saying that you need to understand. And when you understand, that means your mind, your seichel understands. And still we're saying that's the lishmoya b'kol dvorah that you have to learn with bittul. That study should be with bittul. V'al derech, and this would be similar, the Rebbe says, when we talk about the bittul of kol dibur parcha nishmasa, because we're already talking about dibur v'dibur, we're talking about his chalkus as it's divided, which is already connected to understanding Torah. It's in pieces, it's not one. Because dibur echad, if it was with one saying, then it's not understand, then it's just saying. So still over there we find the level of bittul parcha nishmasom is in the level of understanding. Valderech kol dibur v'dibur parcha nishmasom. Similar to what we said before, that on every word and word that the Eibishter said, every saying of the Eibishter, of the Aseres Adibros, parcha nishmasom, their soul flew away. That means that they had the total bittul. Dagam shekol dibur dibur proti, because even though each dibur speaks about specific item, that means that it is divided up already. The inyan ha'ischalku shaykh la'avor v'asog the Torah. If we're talking about dividing up the Torah, a separate dibur, a separate saying, that has a connection to understanding and grasping of Torah. Mikol makom. Akol dibur v'dibur parcha nishmasu. And still, they had that level of bittul that their slow flew away within the mitzias of understanding, within Torah Shabbat Peh. Over here, we need the level. We need that level of bittul. We need the level of bittul in Havana v'Hasoga. And that comes in this perek that we're talking about. Borchi Nafshi es Hashem, we have the 5 levels of Borchi Nafshi, which represents the total bittul in all situations. B'zo hashaychus l'shmoya b'kol dvorei l'chamisha Borchi Nafshi. And that has a special connection to l'shmoya b'kol dvorei, to the 5 Borchi Nafshis that David HaMelech said, which represents the level of bittul. Because we need bittul even by Torah Shabbal Peh, which is a mitzias, and yet it should be bittul, and that connects specifically to the great level of bittul of Chamisha Borchi Nafshi. Ka'chidush be'habittul de Chomesh Pamim Borchi Nafshi. Because the novelty in the bittul of Chomesh, the 5 times Borchi Nafshi, Shem Mizmor Kuf Gimel, in this chapter 103 in Tehillim, over the bittul that we learned in the chapter Kuf Beis, the Lifnei Havaya Yishmech Sichai, that in which for Hashem he pours out his Sicha Shebemizmar Kuf Beis. So they're both bittul, as we said before. All that he wants is Lishpech Sicha from the Baal Shem Tov, that he only wants, he does total bittul, has no needs. And here we're also saying the level of Chamisha Borchi Nafshi, level of bittul. What's the advantage of Perikuf Gimel over Perikuf Beis? Who Shabitl the Lifnei Havai Yishpech Sichai, the bittul of that he pours out his heart before Hashem, who she'ein negeya loy shum davar. That is a bittul which nothing touches him. He doesn't care about anything. Ki kol mevukoshay hu ledaber im hamelech. All that he wants is to speak with the king. But va'bittul the chomesh borchi nafshi. But the bittul in Kuf Gimel, in which we say the 5 Borchi Nafshi, which he says song for everything that happens. Even on matters which are opposite of good, visible and revealed good. So what does that say? That also in matters which are connected to his being are totally subjugated, because he needs those things. Nira v'nigla, he needs it to be, and here these things are no, and yet he's bottle, and he accepts and he says shira for that. So he's tachlis abitl, even in matters that are negeya to him. And that's the advantage of this one, of the Kuf Gimel, to daven to Hashem in Perikuf Beis. He doesn't care about anything. But in Perikuf Gimel, things that are important to him, and still he's in bottle. Over there, he's bottled that there's no Metzias. So, but here, he has his Metzias, and even the Metzias to bottle. That connects with the idea that even in Torah Shabbal Peh, in Limud Torah, where it's necessary the Metzias to be bebittel. By day bittul zeh bitfila, through this bad level of bittul of The chamisha borchi nafshi, being bottled the Eibishter even in things that are connected to your mitzias. The first one again is that those things don't matter to you. Here, the bittul is even when things that matter to you go wrong, and you're still bottled. And by day bittul zeh b'tfila nimshach gam be'esek ha'torah shaloi. So through this bittul in davening, then this extends also in your learning of Torah. Shagam halimud ba'avona v'hasoga hu b'bittul. That also later on when he learns with understanding and grasping, it's in a level of bittul. And that's the special connection to empirical gimel to Baruch Nafshi es Hashem, to the level B'koil Devorei, the bittul of Torah, to the level of the bittul of the Baruch Nafshi, because this is within the Metzias that there should be bottle that comes through the Avedis at Tefillah. Okay, now this explained that how Tefillah is the main level of bittul, and from the level of tefillah, you're mamshich in davening. And we explained, because tefillah is a zerusa de le'elo, and it comes from below, and therefore it has the power, as we said, in the two aspects. First, to reach into a higher level of, higher than hishtalshalus, and it's also shaloi lifi erech, the zerusa de le'tata, that comes from the halos man. This is through tefillah. Mashenkein, Torah is not through bittul. Torah is hamshocha milmayla, is harusa de leila, without, not through harusa de leilata, so it's not such a high place, not as high as tefillah. And from the level of tefillah, you bring down later on also to the level of limud Torah. The bittul of tefillah is mamshich from the higher level to the level that also the Torah should be on that level of bittul, as the Rebbe discussed the different yigia b'Torah and the shoyneh meya pamim va'achas, and even down in fourth tefillah, all these levels, the level that it should be the level of bittul. And as the Rebbe has explained over here, that the Torah should be through the Hakdama of Nasel and Nishma, you achieve the level of Tan L'Shonim Rosecha, that it should be Ka'ina Achara Koire, that you're the Eibishter is speaking, and you're the total level of Bittul, and this comes all through Tefillah. But the Rebbe is going to now give it a little bit of a turnaround, and we'll explain that ultimately the level is Dira B'Tachtonim. And the Hamshocha of Torah is Hamshocha that comes down Lamata. So while we're talking about the source, what we bring down from the level, higher level, through the level of Tefillah, which comes through Allah Asman. But where it goes down to, where it becomes a Dira B'Tachtonim, that is through the level of Torah. And in that area, Torah actually has an advantage over Tefillah. That in Torah, you fulfill the Dira B'Tachtonim in the Tachtonim. As the Rebbe continued in the Friedrich, from the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, that the Friedrich Rebbe brings down that all of the Torah the world was created, he says, B'shvil HaTorah. And the Rebbe will explain Lashonis in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer based on this. First, bringing down what the Friedrich Rebbe says, and then the Rebbe will explain how this fits in with the whole connection of the Maimer. Mamshich Maimer, the Bal HaGeula. So, in the Maimer of the Bal HaGeula, La'achrei shemevayer shnei ha'inyonim, the Tefillah Torah. After explaining the two concepts, the concept of Tefillah and the concept of Torah, so he brings in now the Briyas ha'olam, he b'shvil Yisrael u'b'shvil ha'Torah. That the Eibishter created the world for Yidden and for Torah. K'moshe Kosuv, and this is based on the pasuk Bereshis Bor Elikim. So Bereshis, in the beginning, the Torah begins, Hashem created, Elikim created. So the word Bereshis is interpreted, as Rashi brings down, Bereshis hu beis Reshis. That Bereshis borrow for two Reshis, two things that are called Reshis, is why Hashem created the world. The Bria Sa'olam hu b'shvil Yisrael shenikroim Reshis, u b'shvil HaTorah shenikras Reshis. The creation of the world is for Yidden, which are called Reshis. So that's one Reshis, Beis Reshis, one Reshis. And also for Torah, Torah is also Nikras Reshis. As the Psukim are, in which Yidden are referred Reshis to also, and the Torah, which is also Reshis. And that's the reason the Eibishter created the world. Shakavona de B'Yisraelim, the Frierdiker Rebbe says in the Maimer, Hishe Yisrael, Yilmud the Torah. The Yidden should learn Torah K'Moshe Nitna L'Mata B'Olam Hazeh Davke. The Yidden should learn Torah in this world. So now we're saying it's all about learning Torah in this world. Before we were talking about Tefillah and Torah. We talked actually the Maila of Tefillah over Torah. And now we're saying that the world is created so for Yidden to learn Torah Lamata. So Yeshleimer, so the Rebbe says, so what's the connection? Yisrael, the Beis Reshis. What's the connection? We're talking about the two Reshis, Yisrael and Torah. Lamavur lifnei zeh be'inyan Tefillah Torah, to what's explained before about Tefillah and Torah. Ki Tefillah hi avodos u'bitl ha'adam Yisrael. Davening is the level of bitl. That's mainly the person. It's the gavra. It's the Yisrael. That the Yid stands. It's not about world. It's about the level of the person. The level of tefillah is the service, the labor, the work of the person, his bitl. V'lochein shnei ha'inyonim, the tefillah u'toira shayochim lebeis reshis Yisrael v'toira. And that's why there's also both inyonim are connected to Torah and Tefillah. We said B'Shvil Yisrael. They're all connected to the two Reshis, because Yisrael basically is Tefillah, because that's the person's refinement, that's the Tefillah. And Torah is the person connected to Olam, Beis Reshis, B'Shvil Yisrael, and the world. The refinement Tefillah is B'Shvil Yisrael and B'Shvil Ha'olam. So B'Shvil Yisrael, B'Shvil HaTorah, for Yidden and for Torah. So Yidden is the Tefillah, and for Torah is Torah. So why does it say that Yidden to learn Torah? Should say they should daven also. If this is the kavanah in both, he says Reish Torah. Yesh loimar. So the Rebbe said we can explain. Ki inyan hatfila hu alo milmato l'maylo yitzia me'ha'elam. Because the idea of davening essentially is elevation to out of this world. V'akavona de briyas ha'olam, and the intent of the world when we're saying the Eibshter creates the world, hu sheyumshach gilu elokus ba'olam, is that there should be godliness in the world. So while it's B'Shvil Yisrael, B'Shvil HaTorah, But when we're talking about what is the kavanah of the world, is the world. L'chein k'shemnedaber b'inyan hakavanah debriyas ha'olam, when he talks about what is the intent of the creation of the world, Omer gam b'negei Yisrael. So even when we talk about the Yidden and Yisrael, we said is the level of tefillah. So why does it say Yisrael Yilmudu Torah? Say Yisrael Yispalu. He says also she Yisrael Yilmudu Torah. Why? Because ultimately creation of the world is for uh, is for Torah, is for being in the world, is for Hamshocha in the world, not for elevation from the world like tefillah to be elevated. So even the level of tefillah when it comes to creation of the world, dira betachtoinim, the main thing is limud Torah, because tefillah is to leave the world, and here we're talking about creation of the world, to be mamshich in the world. So the main thing is Torah, is yet Yisrael Yilmudu Torah. Even though in Yisrael we have the union of tefillah. So based on this, we can also explain that in the Maimer he brings down be'em shachlo inyan shakavon at the brias ha'olam hi Yisrael yilmedu Torah, as in the continuation of this idea that the intent of the world is that Yidden should learn Torah. So he also brings down the Maimer Chazal mash omru Razal tenai hisna kodesh baruch hu ima ma'aseh bereishis. So the Eibishter made a condition with Maaseh Bereshis. Im Yekayim Yisrael as Terosi. Seems to, over there it says that the Eibishter made a condition with the acts of creation. Im Yekayim Yisrael as Terosi, this, if Yidden will fulfill my Torah. Now the word fulfill my Torah, then the world will have a kiyum. If they don't fulfill, the world doesn't have a kiyum. That means creation, the Friedrich Rebbe brings down the Maimer, is hinges on Yidden doing mitzvahs. So he says Yilmudu, that the pre-creation of the world that Yidden should learn Torah. He brings down the Maimer Chazal that the world exists for mitzvahs, and he says especially the Friedrich Rebbe Mavair over there, the Yekayim Yisrael is Terosi Kima mitzvahs. That when it says there that the Eibishter created the world, that if made a condition with the world, if the Yid will fulfill the Torah, not learn the Torah. Fulfill the Torah means that we do the mitzvahs of the Torah. So why does it say if they will fulfill my Torah? It should say if they fulfill my mitzvahs. But he says there, so why does it say they'll fulfill my Torah? Because how do we perform mitzvahs? By learning Torah. So that's why the Maimer Chazal says, so it's really talking about mitzvahs, because it says Yikaimu. Yikaimu means to fulfill, practical meaning doing mitzvahs. So why does it mean, why does the Pasuk say, why does it say there, if they will fulfill my Torah? Meaning, because in order to do the mitzvahs, you have to learn the Torah, but it's all talking about mitzvahs. So this is all continues that the world was created for Yidden. He said before to learn Torah, that Yisrael Yilmadu Torah, because in order to accomplish the purpose, nivra b'shvil haTorah, that the fact that we're saying the world was created for Torah, hu b'lashoina maimer, is as the maimer, using lashon of the maimer, shekol ha'inyanei ha'olam yiyu al pi Torah. when everything in the world should be according to Torah. So Torah should run the world, basically. How does Torah run the world? Upulas haTorah ba'olam hi'ayidei kiyum mitzvahs haTorah. It's all part of Torah. Torah runs the world. How does the Torah run the world? Ayidei kiyum mitzvahs haTorah, by performing the mitzvahs of the Torah. So the um, the Yidden, the creation of the world is for Torah. In creation of the world, it's mainly negeya to what's negeya to the world. That is Torah. Torah is the purpose, and Torah tells us through its mitzvahs what the world needs in order to impact the world. So that's why Yikaimu Yisrael as Toirosi. It's talking about mitzvahs, but it's about Torah. So it's the way Torah impacts the world. So here, in the beginning of the Maimer that the Rebbe spoke before, we talked about how the main thing is tefillah, and then tefillah is mamshich bittul also in Torah. Now we're talking about the creation of the world. We're saying actually that it's really about Torah. That Torah b'shvil ha-Torah, for Torah to learn around the world. Not even for the level of Yisrael, which is the level of tefillah, but it's for Torah to run the world. Because that's purpose of creation. Creation is that Torah should come and direct how the world is run through its mitzvahs. And this will also explain, now as the Rebbe will explain in Zion, there are two parts in Torah. As far as the level where Torah reaches, Tefillah reaches in a higher level. As far as fulfilling the kavanah of Dira B'Tachtonim, that's Torah directs the world and brings that down. So therefore we have both in Yon. Let's look inside. Zion. Biניהם, לאחרי שמבאר בהמיימר. After he explains in the Maimer Shebriyas ha'olam hu b'shvil Yisrael hu b'shvil ha'Torah, that the world is for Yidden and Torah. V'shekiyum ha'olam hu al yidei kiyum mitzvahs ha'Torah. How does the world exist is by fulfilling Hista Kodesh Baruch Hu Ma'aseh Bereishis is mitzvahs, but mitzvahs of the Torah. We have to do the mitzvahs. It's Yikaimu, but it's all mitzvahs of the Torah. Mamshich ba'maimer biur achiluk. So the Maimer continues to explain the difference between limud haTorah de yochid limud haTorah de rabbim. The difference between learning Torah individually or learning Torah publicly. Shal yidei Torah de rabbim nimshach oir elyon yoser. By learning Torah publicly, we get a higher level of light. Just like as we said earlier, by tefillah, as we said before, just like we said before, by tefillah, that the tefillah b'tzibur goes higher, so through limud haTorah, it goes a higher level. So he says, move on, we can say, b'mikol shikein, mizeh shal yidei tefillah d'rabim. It's a foratory, it's a kol shikein. The fact by tefillah d'rabim, hamshochehi shaloi lifi erech halo, that since we're saying by a tefillah d'rabim, what you bring down is uncomparable to the halaw, the same thing is by limud haTorah. the level of learning publicly, Tira B'Rabim, is, of course, a tremendous Shalei Lefi Erech, what you're mamshich when you learn b'yochid. But we're saying kol shekain. In other words, Torah, if this happens by tefillah, certainly it happens by Torah. Well, now all of a sudden, so it seems like after what the Rebbe, the Friedrich Rebbe explained, that uh, the level of Torah and Tefillah before the Kavone, now that the Indira Bria Sa'ilam is Torah should be through mitzvahs. Now we're saying there's a kol shekain from Torah, from Tefillah to Torah. Look inside. We say that Hanyonim Sheba Maimer Mashma, in the order, the way the Maimer brings down the Friedrich Rebbe in the Maimer is Mashma. The Zeh Shahalimud Amshocha Shal Yidei Torah, Ma'amshocha Shal Yidei Tefillah. We're learning out. We're not saying just like by Tefillah is greater, but a minyan, it's more. The same thing as by Torah. No, he says Kol Shekain. We're learning out that the Amshocha from Torah, that what you're mamshich by Torah by a minyan, we can learn it out from what we draw down. Shal Yidei Tefillah, who ba'ofen the Mekolshken, it's for sure, if this is true by davening, for sure is by learning. How do we get to that Kolshken? It's Shayich la Mevuar Lifnei Ze Be'inyan HaKavona de B'riyas Olam. This is connected. This Kolshken comes about to this that we explained before, that the Kavona of B'riyas Olam is B'shvil HaTorah and Yekaimu Yisrael. So now that we're saying that the Kavona is Yekaimu Yisrael, to be Mekayim the world through Torah, now we see how Torah is a kol shekain from Tefillah. Rebbe explains. So what's the connection? How do we come this now? Because we change the level of Torah when it comes to the level of purpose of creation, of Dira B'Tachtonim. Yeshleim Rabbi Baza. Sha'akavona de Dira B'Tachtonim hi. What is the intention to have a Dira B'Tachtonim? The Eibishter can make his own Dira B'Tachtonim. He can just make a place for him to live over here. But the Eibishter wants the Yid, through his Avodah, to make a Dira B'Tachtonim. Sha'asiyas hadira hamshochas hagila lekus ba'ilom. To bring down godliness in the world, tiyal deya adam. That should take place through the person. V'kivon sha'avodas hatfilo hi halo milmato l'maylo. But tefillah is essentially not bringing down, the person is bringing up. The Eibishter responds through Amshocha, but the person's avodas hatfilo is halo. B'kivon sha'avodas hatfilo hi halo is to elevate milmata l'maylo, and v'hamshocha sha'idei hatfilo mitzad l'maylo. The Hamshocha of the tefillah is because of above. Elo shebo al yidei hatefillah. So it comes from above, what we bring down. The Hebrew is Rusa de Leila. Elo shebo al yidei hatefillah. How do we get this Rusa de Leila? It comes through the davening, through the halah, avodas ha'adam. It's the labor, the work of the person. L'chein yesh yisrein b'hamshocha shal yidei Torah. And that's why there is an advantage when we bring down the Giluim from above, the Giluim through Torah. Shalimud HaTorah, the Adam Mamshech Gilul Kuzboilim. Person learns Torah, that's Torah. The person is Mamshech. It's not the Eibishter responding, giving him. You're learning Torah in the world, that's bringing down godliness in the world. So there's an advantage through Torah legabe hamshocha shaladei tefillah, to the atzrocha from tefillah. Tefillah, you're waiting for the response milumayla, but the person's avodah is to bring it up. Elevation. This is bringing it down to the root. V'apia yedua shamitis sa'inyan de'ein haroich udavke legabe ha'atzmos. That it's known that when we say the true concept that there is no comparison, that you're mamshich something which is uncomparable, and that is the level of atzmus. Really, ein aroich can't compare to anything, is tafke legabe atzmus. Torah, therefore, yesh loymar, the inyan ha'amshocha sheloi lifi erech ha'aloh hu be'iker ba'hamshocha shal yidei Torah. That this idea of to bring down something which is totally uncomparable to what you have elevated is really through the Hamshach of Torah. Torah mamshich atzmus, and this is Shaloi Fe'erech, is when we bring down through Torah. Ki b'hamshocha zu davke, because in Torah nishlemes hakavona dedire b'tachtonim. Why are we saying that this is mamshich atzmus? Because here you're fulfilling the purpose of dira b'tachtonim. Who makes a dira? And the dira is that the Adam should make the dira. The Adam making the dira is through limud HaTorah. So when you're making the limud HaTorah, you are fulfilling the kavanas ha'atzmus. And that means you bring down atzmus into the world. Nishlam is ha'kavanah with Torah. Kavanas ha'atzmus. So when you learn Torah, when we say by tefillah, your mamshich milamaylo shaloi liferech, yeah, it's shaloi liferech. But the true shaloi liferech is to be mamshich atzmos. That you don't get through tefillah, because that you get through the dira b'tachtonim, because you are making and bringing down through avodah. So Adam is making a dira b'tachtonim. So therefore, you're bringing down atzmos through the learning of Torah. So now we understand why, after bringing down that the Torah, the world is created for Torah, because the Torah should direct the mitzvahs, but it's through Torah, and that is the kavanas ha'atzmus. So now we understand why it's a kol shekain from tefillah, because now Torah is in a higher level even than tefillah. So the Torah the Rabbim is for sure since tefillah the Rabbim, because Torah brings down atzmus. So that's what the Rebbe explains the Hamshech and Yoneh. Yes, levayer. Say the Yoneh ba'maimer. Based on this, we can explain the order of the matters as explained the Maimer. The fact that we're learning out that we're certainly by Torah, you certainly Torah barabim will be mamshich. It's a kol shekain mamshocha shal yidei tefillah, and we're learning out Torah from tefillah. That tefillah Rabbim is much more powerful than Yochid, certainly, and we're saying the same is true for Torah, but we're saying it's a kol shekain for Torah. Who b'ofen the kol shekain? This can only be learned as a kol shekain, but dafke la'acharei habir the kavonas habriya. After talking about explaining the purpose of the Bria. Because then we elevated Torah on a higher level even than Tefillah. So then if it happens by Tefillah, for sure by Torah. Ki b'hamshocha shal yidei Torah shnei inyonim. Because there's two aspects to Torah. Because before the Rebbe was talking about that Tefillah is mamshich higher than Torah. And now we're saying that Torah is bemis and mamshich higher than Tefillah, it's atzmus. Even higher than what we get through Tefillah. V'hamshocha shal yidei Torah shnei inyonim. You have two aspects over here. Hamshocha shal yidei Torah mitzad mailas ha-Torah atzma. There is hamshocha from Torah that is for the maila of Torah itself. So you measure Torah and Tefillah not because of the kavanah, of the dira b'tachtonim, of the Eibishter's intent, but you're talking about what is greater. The greater is through bittul, is through Tefillah. Tefillah is greater. That's what the beginning of the Maimer was talking about. In the beginning, shal yidei Torah mitzad hamaylas Torah atzma. Hamshocha zui lamata hamshocha shal yidei Tefillah. Kinal Siv Gimel, as I said before, Siv Gimel is Tefillah is mamshich in a greater level from the Hamshocha of Torah. The Hamshocha sha'idei Torah mitzad zeh, then there's another part that you're mamshich because of the fact that Torah is the Torah b'tachtonim, sha'yodanim shachgila kus ba'olam, it's because the person learning is bringing now godliness into the world. That's the person's action. As he's learning Torah, he's bringing one into the world. From that perspective, the Hamshocha Zuhi L'mayla Hamshocha Shal Dei Tefillah Kinal. This Hamshocha is greater than Tefillah. That's bringing down Atzvus into the world. So Torah itself, not because fulfilling the Tachtonim, the Kavona is lower than the Tefillah. But Torah, when it brings down the Kavon of Dira B'Tachtoinim, it's at that perspective, it's higher. So therefore, after explaining the intent of creation, he explains that the Kavona Sabriya is B'Shulat Torah, and the Torah should bring down in the world. And this is accomplished through the Torah because the Torah is the Dira B'Tachtoinim, and the world is run through the Torah, through its mitzvahs, is through the Torah and impacting the world. Torah Davke. And again, as explained before, even Yikaimu Yisrael, but it's that the Torah should direct. It's all about Torah. So after he says, Moisif, so now he adds to the point that learning Torah and Tefillah is not just like by Tefillah is Tzibur is more important. The same thing is by Torah, but it's a kolshke now, because right now we pointed out already that Torah is even higher than Tefillah. There is an advantage of Torah over Tefillah, because Torah is mamshich atzmus, because Avodas Ha'odom is in Torah bringing down the Dira B'Tachtonim becomes Avodas Ha'odom. So now it's a kol shekain for Torah from Tefillah because of this other aspect. So b'Tefillah we talk Tefillah is higher than Torah, and now after we see the kavanah of the Dira B'Tachtonim is through Torah, it becomes a kol shekain. If it's by Tefillah, Torah is higher, so sure it should be by Torah. V'yesh l'kasher v'zeh. All right, we'll leave this for next time.